Dr. Glenn Diesen is a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway and an editor at the Russia in Global Affairs Journal. Professor Diesen is joining us live from Oslo. Professor Diesen, great to have you with us again. First of all, do you share the same optimism as several people across the world have on Trump bringing peace to the globe when he assumes power of the United States? Or are you skeptical, like the Kremlin? Because people tend to forget that Trump, as in every politician, promised all that while campaigning, and that might change once he takes charge.
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic. I do think that Trump is genuine when he says this, because I think he recognizes that the war has already been lost. At this point, I think it's just squandering lives and equipment. So being very pragmatic, looking at cost benefit, I think he doesn't want to put more money into this. When he says it's the Europeans' problem, I think he believes this. Not only is the war being lost, but this whole thing was the whole intention of this war from the American side was to weaken Russia as a strategic rival, so they could focus the resources on countering China. But now we instead see that Russia is military is even more powerful now than it was at the beginning of the war, and they're pushing Russia into the arms of China. So strategically, and also from a humanitarian perspective, none of this really makes any sense. And also, of course, Trump could change his mind, but he's also surrounded himself with people like Kennedy, Tulsi Gabbard, Elon Musk, which are also apparently quite eager to get a peace in Ukraine. So I think it would be hard for him to turn around at this point. So again, I'm optimistic that we're going to at least start to see some diplomacy. But I think the key weakness for Trump is he might have too great of ambitions in terms of what he can achieve, because after almost 3 years, it's a peaceful settlement, as Russia is going towards victory now, is going to have include some very painful concessions, not just neutrality, but also territorial concessions.
Professor, what do you make of Italian Deputy Prime Minister's proposal that Trump should be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize once he ends the war in Ukraine?
Well, of course, if he's able to end the war in Ukraine, then he definitely deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. Again, this is a major war raging in Europe. It's killed hundreds of thousands of young men, which will not be coming back. It's a disaster. It's a tragedy. So if he's able to bring an end to this war, that is the purpose of the Nobel Peace Prize. Of course, it all depends on getting the prize afterwards. They gave the Peace Prize to Barack Obama for giving a few speeches before he effectively began to double down on all the policies of his predecessor. So I hope that it's not merely an intention, but also one gets the Peace Prize for what one is actually able to achieve. But of course, ending this huge tragedy of a war, definitely he would be deserving of it.
It's a huge cost. Apart from Trump, let's talk about the latest in the war. Ukraine reportedly attacked several regions with drones in Russia, forcing Moscow to shut down at least 3 airports. What's the message that Ukraine is trying to pass with their latest salvos?
Well, I think the problem for the Ukrainian government is that most of the world now sees that this is coming to an end. The army seems to be collapsing. In the past, they could cover this up when the territories weren't moving that much, but now that they're losing huge amount of territory as well, the war is obviously lost, and this is making many of its backers to effectively looking to cut its losses, which is also the logic of Donald Trump. So I think Ukraine has a great incentive to give the impression that the war can still be won. So if they can launch some few drones into Russia, deep into Russia, create some havoc, and then of course across the US and Europe, you'll have enough journalists who wants to keep this war going, who will then present this as the Ukrainians might win after all, then it might be enough to get the weapon shipments continue to flow into Ukraine. And again, for countries not to begin to pursue a diplomatic path. But I think this isn't going to have much of a significance to shut down some airports temporarily. I think it's merely a superficial way of trying to avoid or delay defeat. So.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. I've been talking to Dr. Diesen. He is a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway. Professor Glenn, as always, thank you for your time and for talking to us today.
Thank you, Eric.